Today we are talking about vintage diamond engagement rings, and this presentation is brought to you by www.qualityvintageengagement.rings.com. Now, the engagement ring is a huge part of the engagement and the wedding process. I think every bride dreams all of her life about this ring that she's going to wear, for the rest of her life. And many brides today are choosing to go with a vintage engagement ring instead of a regular modern style engagement ring, just because the vintage rings have, a different type of style. They've got that older characteristic that is really timeless. It can be carried throughout the years without losing the style or becoming out of style. So vintage rings are kind of the new in. There are a lot of beautiful rings to choose from out there. One thing to understand is there is a difference between a vintage ring versus a vintage style ring. A vintage ring is a true dated ring that was created, years ago. And a vintage style ring is a modern ring that was created more recently that's replicating a vintage style. Sometimes vintage style wedding rings are made to duplicate, a specific ring that the bride likes, or sometimes it just mimics a specific style or jewelry decorative period. There were actually 6 decorative periods lasting between the 1700s up until about the 1950s, and those decorative periods are the Georgian, Victorian, Edwardian, Art Nouveau, Art Deco, and Retro decorative periods. Each of them have very unique and individual styles, and we don't have time to go into that today, but if you want more information about the decorative periods and the characteristics that belong to those periods, check out our website at qualityvintageengagement.rings.com. Now, if you're planning on buying a vintage diamond engagement ring, first of all, you need to determine if you would like a true vintage ring or if you'd like a modern style vintage ring that is replicated, based on a ring that you'd like or a specific jewelry period that you like. So determine if you want to spend the money to get a true antique. There are advantages to both of those. If you do get a vintage ring, a true vintage ring, it's going to have, a story behind it. It's going to be a piece of art that has lasted through the years. So there's definitely benefits to that. Or if you decide to go with a vintage style ring that is a modern ring, there are also some great advantages to that. One of them is the fact that you get to choose what type of metal and gems that you like and decide on the specific style that you want. So it is a lot more customizable if you decide to go with a modern ring. And then once you've decided on if you'd want like an older ring or a modern ring, determine which style you'd like exactly. Decide if you want something that's more feminine and flowing like the Victorian decorative period, or if you want something more bold and making a statement like the Art Deco period. You've definitely got a lot of choices that way, so it's really up to you and your own personality. And then once you've determined that, start looking for the ring that you love. If it's a custom ring, you can go just let them know what style you want and what you're looking for, and they can make the ring just like that for you. Or if you want, a true vintage ring, then you can start looking at antique stores and vintage sellers. We've got some great information about buying vintage rings on our website, and so you can take a look at that if you're looking to take it that way. But there are a lot of options if you're planning on purchasing a vintage diamond engagement ring. We don't have a lot of time in this video to go through a lot of details, but if you do want more information, check out our website. That was www.qualityvintageengagement.rings.com.